Hello everyone and welcome back to the Clutch Chess International. We are continuing with Game 8 of the semi-final match Magnus Carlsen versus Levon Aronian, and it's quite a game. It's a masterpiece basically. So without further ado, let's check it out. Magnus with the white pieces opens with c4. He goes for the English, and we have knight to f6 by Levon. Knight to c3 and e5 now, striking in the center, the two knights of the English variation, and the g3 now, the Carl's Bremen system, preparing to fight for the d5 square by fianchettoing the light square bishop. We have bishop to b4. Levon also fights for the d5 square by challenging the knight on c3, which defends the d5 square, so it is possible to, let's say, capture and then execute d5, but Magnus goes e4, saying that he really wants to control the d5 square. And now you can't really capture and capture, because if you go for something like this, captures, b captures, and the knight captures here, just queen e2 will force the knight back, and you will win back your pawn. Even if you defended just d3, and you can still pick it up, so you don't really win a pawn that way. So after this e4 move, we have castles by Levon, and now knight g to e2. We have d6 by Levon, and now bishop to g2 is a move that has been played before in a few games, but h3 by Magnus is a new move, so already as a move 6 we have a completely new game. So Levon continues developing. We have knight to c6, and now bishop to g2. Magnus also prepares the castle, and a6 now, preparing to strike on the queen side with b5. We have castles by Magnus, and now b5. b5 is a very interesting pawn sacrifice that white should not accept, because if you go for the pawn with knight captures on b5, bishop to a6 is super annoying here. Attacking the knight, it's also on the same diagonal as the rook on f1, so after you go back, you have ideas like bishop to d3, which would completely slow down white's development, and this is not something you want to do for the price of one pawn, especially in a rapid game. In a classical game, you can snatch a pawn and then suffer for 3 hours and then, come on top, but in a rapid game, maybe not so much. So b5, and Magnus defends with the d3. We have b captures on c4, we have d captures on c4, again keeping control of the d5 square, and bishop back to c5 now, not allowing Magnus any f4 ideas, but Magnus already made room for the king on h2, so he shifts it over to safety, and now in the future you can play f4 if you need, or f3 for that matter. So rook to b8, putting pressure on the queen side, and now b3. Everything is nicely defended here, and now you're free to continue developing. We have a5. If the knight moves, which it probably will, it's coming to d5, then you can maybe play a4 and create some weaknesses on the queen side. Magnus goes for d5 now. He has an excellent outpost for his knight, and a4. Levon wants to capture on b3. We have bishop to e3, and Levon now just captures. A captures on b3, a captures, and now even bishop captures on e3. And while you could capture with the knight and then shift the knight back to d5, Magnus has different plans. He captures with the f-pawn, which opens up the f-file for the rook, and also if black ever captures here, then you can undouble easily by playing e captures here. So knight to d7, now with ideas of maybe going f5 to open up his own rook, but now knight e to c3 by Magnus. Now Magnus is going for knight to b5, which will put a lot of pressure on c7. So knight to c5, also going for the b3 pawn, now with a double attack, and now knight to b5. Magnus defends the pawn by blocking the rook's attack to the pawn, and puts pressure on the c7 pawn, and we have reached the position from the thumbnail. It's a similar position, not the position, but the placement of the knights from the game Morphy versus Anderson that we've covered. But we might cover it again as we're doing the Morphy saga from the beginning. So now the c7 pawn is under attack, and black needs to defend it. So knight back to e6, guards the pawn, and now h4. Just gives a square, the h3 square, to the white bishop, and of course you are planning bishop to h3 to attack one of the defenders of the c7 square, and then you are hoping to gobble up that c7 pawn. So bishop to d7, and now bishop to h3, now preparing to just eliminate one of the defenders. So rook to b7. Levon needs to add another defender to the b7 pawn. And now b4. Magnus now opens up this diagonal, so the queen can also enter the game. However, we have knight to e7 now, hoping to trade off some knights. Maybe even c6 will be an idea with a double attack on both knights. But Magnus says, no, that's not a problem. He just plays rook to a2. And now it's a very interesting position. c6 doesn't really do anything, since you can always capture with check, and you haven't really done anything. The d6 pawn also will be very weak. So what you could do is you could try and trade off some pieces. However, there's no way to do it. If you capture here, then just e captures on d5. This knight is trapped. It has no squares where it can go. So you just lose a piece here. On the other hand, after this rook to a2 move, Magnus is just planning to double up. And there's very little black can do here. For example, if you try bishop captures on b5, it's really no better. Just c captures on b5, and you're still without a good move. If you try and grab the pawn, then you get bishop captures on e6, f captures, and now rook captures on f8 with check. Queen captures, and now knight captures on c7 with check. Rook captures on b4, and now queen captures on d6. And now all of these pawns will fall, and well, once the rook to a8 comes, it's just a terrible position for black. So not much you can do here. So instead, after rook to a2, Levon played knight to c8, probably with the idea that he just wants to repeat knight e7, knight c8, and see what Magnus will do, or maybe he wants to shift the knight over to b6 to put pressure on c4 and on the knight from there. However, this now loses the game, and feel free to pause the video and try to find this winning idea while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on putting black in Zugzwang, and for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's rook to a8. And now you see that black really doesn't have any moves. You cannot move the rook. If you move the rook from the defense of the pawn, then just bishop captures, and white will capture on c7. And the other moves aren't much better. And the point that rook to a8 is so strong is because if bishop captures on b8, then you win with a rook captures on c8. Queen captures and knight e7 check now just picks up the queen. So that's only one of the problems after rook to a8. So Levon, basically you can move the rook, the king, and maybe queen to e8. So Levon played king to h8, but now Magnus brings the queen into the game. Queen to h5. And now even though you move the king away from check, you still don't have a way of capturing. For example, if you capture on b5, rook captures on f7 is extremely strong. You've removed one of the defenders of the knight here, and after captures, you're just completely lost here. You still can't move the knight. This is just terrible. This is hanging, so not much you can do here. So, after this queen to h5 move, we have queen to e8. Levon adds another defender to the f7 pawn, but now bishop to f5, threatening checkmate. And again, the problem is you cannot play g6, because after g6 you get queen to h6 check, and again, not much you can do here. Knight to f6 is coming, and that's it. Even if you capture knight f6, still wins. There's no defense against checkmate. So, after bishop f5, we have h6, preventing checkmate this way, but now a brilliancy move from Magnus, bishop to h3. Bishop to h3 puts black in complete Zugzwang. There is no move you can make here. Like you could move some pawns, or maybe you can make some silly moves, but no piece can move here. And again, the point of this position is that bishop captures on b5 is never an option. For example, if bishop captures on b5 here, do you see how white wins now? It's very interesting. So even feel free to pause the video and try and find it while I give you a couple of seconds. So for those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on being an expert on the kingside attacks. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it's rook captures on c8. But not just rook captures on c8, but queen captures here, and now rook to f6 gets the job done. The threat is rook captures on h6. After captures with check, you're going to get knight to f6. Or if the rook is captured, just queen captures, king g8, and the knight to f6 now delivers checkmate. So that's how beautiful this position is. So black has no moves. So Levon played c6, but now everything just falls apart. The d6 pawn has now been weakened, so Magnus captures it, and now there's a double attack on the knight. Also, the queen is under attack. So knight captures on d6, and there is no move you can play. it's just a terrible position. If you try something like queen to d8, then you just give up the rook on b7. So you're just giving up more material. So instead, Levon just decided to give up the queen for some material, and Magnus said, okay, rook captures. We have rook captures on e8, and now knight to f6. Again, just busting through the position. Still, the idea is the same. The knight cannot be captured, and now rook to e7 adds more defense to f7. But c5 now, removing one of the defenders of the f7 pawn, knight to c4, and now with a beautiful finish, knight captures on d7, rook b captures on d7, and now rook captures on f7, again removing the defender of the knight, and that's just it. Levon played rook captures, we have bishop captures on e6 with a triple attack now. And there is nothing to be done. Rook to f2 check was played, but after king to h3, it was in this position that Levon Aronian resigned the game, and Magnus wins game 8 of their clutch international match. So here you resign because you either give up the knight or the rook, so obviously you're going to give up the knight, and after bishop captures you only have 2 rooks for a queen and the bishop, which is no compensation. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. I was very, very impressed with how black was in complete Zugzwang with all of the pieces on the board. I really enjoy when something like this happens. So hope you enjoyed that as well. And Magnus won his match against Levon, and Fabiano Caruana won his match against Wesley. So in the finals today, we will have Magnus Carlsen versus Fabiano Caruana, like we did in the former World Chess Championship match. So it's gonna be really awesome, and we're probably gonna cover a bit more games from that match. So, once again, I do hope you enjoyed it. I would like to thank Jacques Zhang, Andrew Drever, Jacob Gonzalez, Peter Mon, and Thomas Jenkins for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the Clutch International Finals, checking up on your wonderful suggestions, and whatever else happens in the chess world. So, thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your weekend.